You talking to me?
No, no, I was talking
To
to
Zach?
Marlon.
Marlon? Oh,
Or
yeah.
whoever said that.
Sorry. What's the topic for tonight?
Take it away, Aubrey.
Okay. Topic for
Sorry.
tonight is, I don't know, what's your title? Talk title, Brian. Do you have one?
Um, no, I don't. Goodness. Whoa,
We could add
all the
whatever.
videos.
We don't need one. It's okay.
Yeah, all
The
the videos switched to nothing there. Sorry, got distracted. Let's just study skills, and I'm actually gonna be open to doing parts of 3 different presentations that I would do. So I don't really have a title. Bryan study tips discussion. We can say
Cool.
the Bryan. Thank you, Colin. Thank you.
So yeah, I'll give the Brian an introduction. The Brian is a coach and has just found out over 105
No,
students, but not
about
active
80
students.
students. About 80 students.
About 80 students.
James got
It's
on to
also
me at one presentation. Yeah, James Glenn was like, "Don't say that. Like, don't say I've got 100 students that I call on a regular basis because people are like, that guy has no life."
Yeah.
So he was like, he has over 70 students.
There you
So
go.
that's what my line's usually been.
Over 70 students. Over 70 students. Forget that all of that just happened. He has over 70 students, and he also is on the student life department. He's one of those, like, I don't want to say invisible because he does like a whole like heck of a lot of work, but nobody really knows that he's on the student life team.
Yeah.
So he's on the student life team, and we get to be in go-to meetings and have boring meetings every other week. So that's when I see Brian or hear Brian.
Yeah.
So anyways, so he obviously being a coach knows something about study stuff, and so wanted to share a little bit. And I think we're going to start out with a discussion. So everyone should unmute themselves because we're all going to be talking. So, and then he's going to share study tips. So there you go, Brian. Here's your professional introduction.
And the discussion part, really, I wanted to make sure that whatever we do here is helpful for you guys. So I, coaching for 3 years now, we've run into loads of testing challenges, learning challenges, worked with students with solid learning challenges, other students that just haven't learned to study for level studies. So I wanted to make sure that whatever we cover is most useful to you guys. So I wanted to start with something like an open Q&A, and we might keep those questions for later, or we might address them pretty quickly here. So how about you guys just take time to list 1 or 2 questions you'd like to make sure that we cover here tonight. It's a very coach thing to do. Zachary's deep in thought. Marlon's deep in thought.
I think one that would be some good advice is how do you stay focused on boring material when you have this exciting stuff right beside you and at your fingertips? Because that's how our today's society is. Just everything amazing is right at your fingertips, but you really have to really stay focused to be able to gather the information when you're trying to read like a boring club test, not club test, a club book.
Yep, that's a good one. That is definitely something we'll cover with one of the main topics here. And that's perspectives. Talk about video games. By the way, I went to Bible college for my degree, and on a campus of 300 to 500 students, can't remember what it was, but I was the best Halo player on campus. So that's one of the things that qualifies me for this talk, I guess.
Sweet.
The best Halo player at a Bible college?
Yeah, out at a Bible college, isn't that a wonderful way to be remembered?
There are certainly worse things to be remembered by.
Yeah, I
That's
guess.
what I was just thinking.
What other questions should we tackle today?
So one question I might have is, how do you determine the most efficient way to study? With all the material options you have, figuring out, what you can skim, what you need to really dig into, what you don't need to cover at all.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's a
think for
toughie.
I think for me, I'm a very visual learner, and so when I'm studying, I tend to be writing a lot because even just seeing myself write it helps cement it. I do timelines and different things like that, but a lot of those are very time consuming. So maybe, I don't know, talking about different ways for visual learners um, to make that process a little bit faster, maybe, or a little bit more efficient.
I was trying to minimize my typing noise. So, yeah. I'm going to add my response to yours, Krista, down here. So I'll definitely address that. I consume. The visuals are so powerful, and yet they can be a bit time consuming. There's a cost and benefit difference there between the two, and generally it's going to be better to make the visuals, even though it takes more time because the learning you get is deeper. But there's also ways to speed up the visual process too.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I'm going to get 10 more seconds and then we'll jump into kind of a presentation. But, oh yeah, we'll jump into presentation in 10 seconds. Unless someone else has something. About to say something, Donnie?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm just I was reading some stuff that I've been doing over the last few weeks. What do you do when you reach, like when you've been studying and studying and studying and studying, but you're just hitting a brick wall and you can't seem to tackle it? And sometimes that's a point where people get frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Could you describe that plateau a little bit further?
Well, for me, I've been, I was reading my notes from my last coaching call, and one of the things that we talked about was that with some of the subjects I've been working with, especially like I've been working on English English Comp 2, and and with an extended course like that where I'm having to write 2 or 3, like read Frankenstein, then write 2 or 3 papers, and then do an interview, and then write another 2 or 3 papers, and then stuff like that, it seems to get redundant. Sure. And like, I've done this before, kind of done with it, and it's kind of a waste of time. How do you keep yourself motivated, and how do you not, kind of just like lose your edge?
Sure. Maybe we'll jump into that one here to start. And now I'm trying to balance between being like a mentor or a coach. I guess, Donnie, like what was another test or course where you had the same kind of plateau and you pushed through it?
I don't know. For me, it was college algebra.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a math is definitely not my favorite subject, and so working through college algebra was a hard one for me.
Was that Alec's course?
Yes, it was.
Gotcha. So, what helped you push through into that one?
I guess I was really motivated to get it done and to be done with it because I knew once I finished college algebra, I didn't have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I realized later that I'm probably going to have to do calculus, but for the moment, I'm done with college algebra. And so that was the number one thing for me.
Yeah. And with English Comp 2, that's definitely the truth of that one. Like there's not a 3. You do have to do writing for Thomas Edison or Liberty, but not another writing course. So that would be the case there. Like, when did you get sick of it and you were like, I'm just getting it done?
From the very beginning. I was doing college algebra, and I told them I'm on the call. But
No problem.
like I started the first week, and that was my mindset because I'd known that algebra was not my favorite, and so I wanted to get it done.
Gotcha. Hello, Riley.
Hi.
So with something like college algebra and English composition, you hit a plateau. English composition, you have a challenge of having to wait for them to give you the feedback. But I guess what my main encouragement to you would be is to one thing, to make a checklist of everything that needs to happen, and including what you've done already, and mark that off. Mark off what you have done so far. Another thing is I might chunk it to where you define success by each subcategory. And you're not unique with this particular course. It is a challenging course to push through. And are you a Liberty student?
Yes.
Yeah. So all the Liberty students essentially take this one. So chunk it and define success differently. And one of the last-ditch things might be combine it with some other form of study, something else to study. Some of my students find that helpful. What else would I do? Like, how much have you done? Let's say, what percentage have you completed so far, Donnie?
Let's see. Well, right now I know I'm on topic 19 out of 25. I'm not that good. I'd have to get a calculator.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do that. Let's do that. So, how much time did it take you to get to 19 out of 25?
I spent about a month doing it so far.
Good. Good. Yeah, we'll do some basic math. So that means at this pace, someone is going to do this faster than me. That's 20.
Close to 5
hours?
modules, close to 5 a week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Five
my
modules.
goal has been to do 2 a day. So I've been a little bit behind on that, but I don't know.
Well, like 2.5 days or 2.5 to 5 days, and it seems like you have that one done, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to get it done.
So when you think in terms of you got 5 more days to finish it at that pace, and just thinking in those terms because mathematically that's what would happen at this rate, what does that do to your motivation?
That's definitely encouraging, knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. What's helpful sometimes is just to do the basic math of, if I do this much today, then it will be done by this time at the latest, and just focused on that. That's, with these hard ones, that might just be all that we can do, and then we'll go from there to other more interesting subjects like calculus.
Whoa, looking forward to that one.
But yeah, we run into a lot of plateaus, and what we're going to talk about here tonight can help with those, because we'll deal with just different ways to study material. So Krista, we just got up, it looks like, talked about doing the visuals, and Zachary Most efficient way to study. Marlon dropped out. How to stay focused on boring material. His was the one I wanted to dig into most, so maybe we'll wait a little bit for him to come back to dig into my favorite topics. But yeah, I'm going to just start going, and if you guys want to interrupt me, just like throw something in the chat and interrupt me and say, you know, can you answer this or whatever. Would that be okay?
Okay.
Anything else you think we should adjust to that, Aubrey? This is only my second Empower group.
I think that's great. So
Okay.
go for it.
Go for it. All right, so I did an ebook a little bit ago, and it was this. And in the work to build that ebook, I ran over a few studies that talked about how many methods of learning there are, and there's like 15 to 20 different ways to learn something. And the thing that stood out to me, coming from a public school background myself, my wife's homeschooled, and we homeschool our own kids, but I was public school background. But the public school essentially will train students to mainly study with rote memory. And rote memorization only calls in 2 of the 15 to 20 different ways to learn something. The rote memory happens when you take a book and a curriculum, and then you're tested on that book or curriculum. And when you guys get into your first CLEPs and DSSTs, when you did that, you probably quickly saw that that's not how they work. For one, passing somewhere around 55-ish%. DSSTs have different passing grades. And the tests are built off of anywhere from 2 to 10 books. So you can't just study one book and expect to get 80%, 90, 100%, because it's a different game. And with that being the case, it's important to play by different learning rules. And in order to do that, you have to engage the mind more holistically. So that's this whole idea of having like 20-cylinder learning over 2-cylinder learning. In order to engage the whole mind, we have to bring in all sorts of different methods of learning. So Krista talked about visualization. How many of you guys went through like the memory skills program? Either chat or say something on that.
Yep.
Wait, what was it?
Memory skills.
Oh, yeah. I
Yep.
did.
I did.
I did partially, not completely.
Yeah, a lot of students do it partially. And what I usually encourage my students is to pull out the most helpful parts. All of it is good, but some of it's harder to implement on the front end, and some topics are really helpful for certain pieces of information. The most powerful thing would be something like visualization. And so, I don't know, why don't we make this more of a demo? And someone volunteer, you're studying something and you want some help learning some piece of information that's really tough to memorize. Throw something out there.
I think for me, because my question originated from when I was studying for the CLEPs, History of the United States 1 and 2, and I was trying to keep all of the information categorized in a timeline because I was getting dates really confused. And so my approach was a timeline, but then that got really detailed in itself. And so I kind of learned a little bit about timelines in that. But does that give you enough of a situation?
Yeah, and I want to get to that. Let me put that in here. Sorry. I'm talking more about single subjects. So if you're someone threw out a CLEP test that they're studying for. I do want to get back to what you were saying, Kristen. What's the subject you're studying?
Who is currently working on a CLEP test?
I am.
For DSST.
All right, Zach. What is it?
Principles of marketing.
All right, marketing.
Ooh. That was my favorite.
What would be a principle that you would find more challenging? Have you taken an REA test yet?
I haven't. I just actually started reading the book today, so.
Okay. Let's jump in here and we'll get into the marketing Wikipedia page, which I find just uber helpful to do a survey of stuff. And let's get into something. Someone pick out a part of this article that looks tough. I got a few that I might pull out.
Anybody?
Well, I'm not doing any history at the moment, but history was one that's I used to have to do a lot of when I was before I started College Plus, and we used to memorize stuff using songs. You know, we've all used that technique before, but pertinent idea.
Definitely. Well, that's definitely part of the a vocal learning style. So what we're doing is we're looking at marketing. I mean, we could take something like herd behavior. So we can open up herd behavior. Where is that? This sub-article. And what I would do in order to build a basic visualization is just to take the topic and then make a basic drawing of it. And so automatically as you hear the topic, you hear herd, so you can make, oh goodness, gotta restart my video. You just make some sort of basic drawing of what this is. And so herd clearly would be a cow, right? And then we toss in some extra stuff into here. And so herd behavior talks about how people act according to the group, and it started with W.D. Hamilton. And so how can we remember that W.D. Hamilton came up with this? Well, the ham comes from what part? It comes from the hindquarters, right?
I was going to be like the butt.
Okay, yes,
Yeah,
exactly. And so you have a can of WD ham, just like the WD-40 can, which looks amazing in my very quick thing here. This WD Hamilton is the guy that came up with the article, or came up with the idea. And it's evolutionary, so you could even draw like a little fishy there with legs or something. I don't know. Something that represents evolution to you. And I mean, you can keep doing this, and essentially what this becomes, this herd behavior, cow thing, can become a canvas on which you put other things. So here you've got the cuts of meat, but then you can also put like, well, how does it work might be the legs, right? And some of the other concepts might be in the head or the body or whatever. You can get just as creative as you like it to be. And the benefit of doing something like this, and I'm not sure if you guys have tried anything like this, but it can be very helpful in allowing you to bring your notes to the testing center. Because when a student takes notes for a test, they're going to take notes most of the time outline format. And essentially it's going to look a lot like the book, except in their own text, and even more boring sometimes. So when you're at the testing center and you're trying to recall what that looked like, it's going to be just a jumble of info. But this, if you can remember, oh, herd behavior, and let me look at what the cow looks like. Like it's something that you can remember. You can even draw it out when you're at the testing center on your scrap piece of paper. So visualizations can be great. The downside of them is that they can be a little bit overwhelming to do a visual for everything. So some of my students are like, that's way too much work to do. In that case, I encourage a couple of different things. First off, the work to do it is actually about the same amount in order to make the note itself. It just takes a bit of play, right? So I just went with the obvious here, herd, and it meant something to me. Is it the best way to illustrate this concept? No. But if I'm jotting down an outline or making this, which one's going to be more valuable, right? So if I can do this as quickly as possible and make my visuals, and then I come back to this little piece of paper as I have on here herd behavior. I can't write for anything. But I can come back and it's like a flashcard that I can reuse. In fact, this is a great way to build flashcards. On one side you have the definition or term, and on the other side you have this visual. Another example I usually go with is Archimedes. This is the one I have in the book, where it's just any other Greek guy with a white beard, wears a toga, and he's a natural philosopher, so he's in the same category as so many other guys that you had memorized in history. And history is a good place to do this kind of stuff, Donnie, where you have Pope Innocent, Henry the King, Edward, and Charles's, and all the different kinds of kings that had the same name. How do you distinguish them? Well, these kind of visuals can really help. So with Archimedes, you just take his name and you draw a St. Louis archway. You draw a Greek guy wearing a toga with a big white beard, and he's got two arms coming out. One hand has a pie with the symbol for pie steaming out of the pie. So it's a nice, warm, hot apple pie. And then the other hand has a calculus book that's a rough draft. And so rough draft calc. So this is me doing an extremely faster presentation. But if you also put the little medical hat on Archimedes, this is Arch for archway, Med for Medes. That's his name, Greek guy. He came up with an approximation of pi, 3.4 something like you guys know, and he also anticipated calculus. Now, again, this acts as a canvas. You can put other things into the picture and, again, bring the notes. You can make a visual for Plato, then Socrates, then Aristotle. And off of those guys, you can build other stuff. Now, how do you do this with a timeline? And timelines are great. Like Christo is using timelines, but with history, especially like Western Civ 1, it can be pretty overwhelming. My main thing is to chunk things down as much as possible. So either a pretty big canvas for one time period, or lots of little canvases for the subcategories in the timeline. And as you're building it, again, like the notes, build it quick, build a caricature. So instead of writing out Magna Carta, this date, which don't ask me, because there's actually multiple dates, but you have Magna Carta, and that would be over a few different periods of time, like 3 main jots in English history. You could have a big card and just say MC, and put some real quick details on that card. You could have a visual for King Henry. It might be the mental picture you have for a guy named Henry that you know, and you can put that real quick visual onto the timeline. Instead of writing out King Henry III, you can put Henry sitting on the number 3, and then put something next to him. So the visual can compound memes. You guys know memes, right? They're extremely basic. Everyone knows what it means. right? And so the more you can meme your notes, the better, right? And so as you build a timeline, instead of trying to make everything written out detail, make it more visual. And what you do then is you go back through and try to explain what each of those pictures means. And if you don't know, then you look for it. But that engages the mind in so many different levels. It creates, which is one learning. It sees a visual. It sees it in context of everything else. It allows you to guess and quiz yourself without seeing the exact answer there, which is a problem with most timelines. You see the answer, and so you don't really learn as you review back through. And if you don't know it, you have to go back, which is also helpful. So visuals are very powerful. Donnie was bringing up songs, and that's another excellent thing. Essentially, as creative as you can be with content, the better. But to make it doable in a CLEP test, focus that creative work, like the harder creative work, on the harder material. But your regular note-taking, at least make it a little bit creative. So instead of making an outline, make a little outline with a little character, a little person, something to make it more visually appealing. So that when you get to the testing center and they ask you a question and you don't remember where that is in your notes exactly, or what the answer is exactly, you can remember what the visual should contain it, and then you interpret the visual like you were as you're studying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, what do you guys think of, like, how you would apply that kind of learning?
This kind of goes into a past experience, kind of saying what you did with the Western civilization. I was having a super hard time keeping track of all the kings because they have similar names, and I didn't know what any of them looked like, or I didn't have any personal details. So my coach was saying, like, attach a Disney character to each one,
Yeah.
and then just think of that one every single time you see it, so that you can have a picture of them, and then linking those two together.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Other things that I might add, so we've come up with, in order to get full 20-cylinder learning, whatever we want to call it, full holistic learning, make visuals. If you build timelines, chunk it down and make the timeline even further visual. If you are not acquainted with mind maps, definitely try mind maps. There are 2 College Plus blogs on those that I just put up there. Teach someone else. Real basic. Find a study buddy on the forums, or just over dinner, or anyone, like a 3-year-old. Just teach them. And if you can't find anyone to teach some imaginary person. Just say it out loud. Vocalize it. Make like little poems, ditties, something to make it audio, to memorize the kings in order. Make some sort of song in order to do that. This is probably the one that my students like to hear least, but essays are not a homework tool. They are a learning tool. They're not a testing tool. They are a learning tool. So essays are actually good for. There went Colin. Colin was upset. But essays are actually a real good way to process information. And so if you're going to be studying something, consider even writing a little bit about it and trying to say, okay, if I was to explain this to my grandmother or a 4-year-old, how would I write about it? So engage your mind in different ways. Whenever you hit a plateau with processing information that you find really challenging, bring in one of those types of learning. The next thing I'd like to talk about, though, is more interesting. So before we jump into that, any other thoughts, questions, comments on what we covered there?
I have a quick question. What do you mean when you talk about 2-cylinder versus 20-cylinder?
That's what I was. It's just my way of making 2 types of learning styles versus 20 types of learning styles more interesting sounding. Again, rote memory engages recall and recognition as 2 out of the 15 to 20 different ways to learn something. And we want to, yeah, so when you're learning something, you want to engage the mind as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Public school and industrialized education focuses on boxing up learning in chunks where others can process it the fastest and in the most broad way. And that happens through just going through the content, taking a test on that content, and pretending like you really learned something.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really learn, and you don't enjoy it either. And in fact, that is not a human way of learning. It's more like a computer. You put something into the computer, and it spits it out. While creative learning is distinctly human. What we were doing there with that little exercise is fun, and it can make learning more enjoyable. And it can make it a lot more sticky. I guess.
Yeah. That definitely makes sense.
Yeah. To share my own story, I went. I did full-time preaching for 8 years, and I always had trouble getting away from my 10 pages of notes. They were large print, but I had a hard time interacting with my audience. When I started applying these kind of things, and I did the visuals with a house peg list, and I highly recommend house peg lists with about 4 to 5 rooms. I went from, in 1 month, 10 pages of notes, 1 page of note, or one page of notes, then a flashcard, and then the next week I went to no flashcard at all. It was just in my pocket. And the difference was that I was walking through my notes in my head because I could visualize it. And it helped me have confidence. And for my students that apply these things, they also have further confidence with their studies. And the cool thing is this is helpful outside of school. So as you learn better learning skills, you learn career skills. And that's what I prefer. I discourage students from just passing CLEPs because they could be missing out on learning how to learn more effectively if they push themselves. Any other thoughts before we jump over to video games?
I do have a question, actually.
Go for it.
I'm also a very visual person, so I like this idea of creating visuals to help you remember things. But I also happen to be a completely terrible drawer.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you come up with a visual, you have the picture in your mind, but you can't translate it? Yeah.
See, the thing is, that's me, and I'm a better drawer than this, but I don't care, and it matters to you. You're the only one looking at this drawing.
Yeah.
There's no one else in the classroom that the teacher is going to be like, "Hey, everybody, look at what he made," right? So no one cares but you, and as long as you can interpret what that picture is, that's what matters. And the truth is, like some students might go to a program that allows them, like it kind of draws it for them, that kind of thing. But for you to draw it out physically is going to have the most learning in the process. And then you can learn as you use it as part of your study notes. Now, push come to shove, you can take Creative Commons pictures off of Wikipedia and use those if you'd like. But I definitely prefer making it myself, even if it just looks horrible, because it's only me and you guys that see what I draw.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what I'm going to get into is not just for video games. We can do it with movies. We can do it with books, if you're a really big fiction fan, that kind of thing. But I like video games because as College Plus coach, I work with guys, and we guys do have a tendency to save the world every night, right? Because we want to live lives with significance and change. And so one of you guys will go with, I mean, anyone. When I say guys there, I mean anyone here because I'm from the South. But anyone here that would like to volunteer, I need you to be able to tell me what your first video game was with a decent story, not Pong. But what would be your first video game that you ever played with a decent story? Someone throw one out.
Mine, there was an iPhone game out that it was called Mario Combat, and I played like the first, like I spent like, it came out a couple years ago, and I spent like my entire summer playing that game, and since then I don't play hardly any video games now, which is kind of funny how that changes. But it was just I don't even remember the whole plot, but it was just, you know, I was just obsessed with it for like 3 months of my life.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. This is... One second. I just have to look it up because I'm not familiar with it as much. Okay, so it's like a Call of Duty style?
Yeah, it's like an iPhone Call of Duty.
Mm-hmm. Oh... I might come back to this. I'm gonna take one more option just to see if we can, if it's one that I can remember, so I can ask more interesting questions.
Yeah.
We might come back to this one.
Something that's more familiar. I get that.
It's easier if I remember it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I'm pulling up the information so we can build it if we need to. Yeah. Here we go. Someone give me one more option that we can pick from.
Well, I know I had mentioned Neverhood on our call earlier.
Yeah.
You said you weren't familiar with that, though. I'm trying to think what else. I don't know. I've played so many games. It's depressing.
Me too. Putting you on the spot.
Well, you said you're a Halo player, so let's just stick with that. How's that work?
Sure. Which one?
Works with me. Any of them. I don't care. 1, 2, 3, 4. ODS,
Sure.
Reach. 5.
Okay, up to 3. That's when I graduated. So let's see. Let's go with 1. And yeah, what was the first? Well, what's the main character's main name?
Master Chief.
Yep. Color?
Green.
No. Keep going. What kind of green?
Color.
What kind of green?
Like a, I don't know, like a kind of metally green, dark green, maybe olive green.
Yeah, olive green, I think is what I'd call it. What was his main companion's name?
Cortana.
And how'd she stick with him?
She's an AI that's stuck in his helmet.
Okay. What happened to the Admiral?
He didn't make it.
What happened in the library? That's a tough one.
Are you saying like the flood?
Yeah. Okay, you got it. We could keep going,
Yeah.
but I think we'll stop there just for play purposes. Now, what we're doing here is what I love doing with some of my guy students. It's whenever a student says to me, "I'm just having the hardest time remembering any of this stuff. I feel like I've studied all I can, and I can't remember anymore." And they talk like they're a cup that's too full, and if they pour any more memory in, they're going to lose what they already have in their studies. Have you guys ever felt like that? Okay, yeah. It's very normal, but it's more short-term memory focused than long-term memory. Because like what we did with Connor, and we could do the same with any of you guys, with any memorable event in your life, any awesome movie, book, anything that you really engaged in. The way you engaged it made it more sticky, right? So I guess the main thing I'd like to have you walk away from this get-together would be that the way you engage enables you to learn more effectively. If you engage with a video game perspective, to label that, that would look like engaging it visually, with audio, with story, as a first person, and as if what you studied really mattered. So if I'm learning about the persecution of the reformers by the Catholics, and I'm trying to remember all these people's names and dates, I can only go so deep with my learning. But if I imagine a story where I am one of the characters and I have to watch out for these people with these names, these are their leaders, and these are my friends, and if that's just the way I read the content, because that's my perspective for learning, the learning goes up dramatically. Purdue did a study where if you take 3 different groups of people, one group you tell, look at this list, organize it. What's most important to you, least important to you? The second group, you're going to a foreign nation, and you've never been there before. What's most important to you in that situation? What's least important? And then the third group, you're going to go and you're going to be shipwrecked on this island or in the middle of a desert or whatever. What's most important to you on this list? What's least important? By far, those in the last category who all they were doing was imagining that they were in peril, they memorized things much more effectively. The imagination, as you engage the imagination just that much, it actually turns up your learning ability. And that's why I can remember some of the very first video games that I played from 1987 when they came out, because it engaged my mind in that way. How about we take the way God made us to learn most effectively and apply it to what we want to learn? What difference would that make to you? And again, whether it's a video game, making a film, because I have some film students, or writing a story, because there's a lot of writers like Zachary here. How would engaging in your content with that perspective, as if what I'm doing in English literature or what I'm doing in math, I'm going to write a story about it. Well, how might that change the way you engage that?
You're more invested into it, like you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So you have more. It's a lot easier for you to take from something you're invested in than something that you're not. And it helps certainly recalling from memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what that brings to mind is, like with English comp that I've been working on, I had to read Frankenstein, and I never imagined that I'd actually enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Like I got the book and I was going, okay, here goes nothing. Yeah. And then I actually, started reading it, and I'm like, and now that I had to, I wrote a couple papers about it and I moved on, I can remember most of the stuff that happened in the book. Mm-hmm. And even though it's a fairly lengthy book, I mean, it's not like, a novel, but, or super long. But if, when I go back and I read something like, if I'm reading an REA guide before I go and take a CLEP test or something, for some reason I don't remember it as well as I did the story. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and that's all about that point. It's this, when we invest ourselves in the literature, then we understand it better and recall it.
Yeah. So how can I build a little bit of a story out of that REA that's so dull? And that is what Marlon was saying at the beginning. How do you study something, and how do I stay focused on very, very boring material? Well, you play with it. You create something from it. Since they didn't take the time to make it interesting, you make it interesting. And it works. So that would be my biggest encouragement to you. In anything you study, you make it more interesting. And that is study. And there's the bell. I actually have a late coaching call at 9:15, so I will be heading out pretty soon. I hope this was partially, maybe a little bit helpful for you guys. And if you guys have any other thoughts or questions before I head out, I'd love to be able to stay and chat if you had anything that you'd like to talk about.
It was certainly nice getting a lot more than what we had briefly gone over on the coaching call this morning. Yeah, versus just kind of not necessarily being stuck with that, but developing a lot more than what we had left with this morning.
Yeah.
That was certainly a lot more helpful.
It was fun meeting Connor this morning as a new student. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited now to put some of these things into practice because I've heard of some ideas, but I've never implemented them fully. So tonight was very encouraging. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
And don't feel like you have to do it all. But I definitely encourage you to do more. Have more fun, at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took 2 pages of notes. Now I'm going to go and put them on a cow diagram.
Awesome.
If it helps you remember.
Like, this is how I'm going to do it.
And next time I present, I'll talk to you about good study foods, too.
Looks plenty good to me.
Yeah.
Brain food.
Yeah. Thank you, Aubrey, so much for letting me join tonight.
Thank you so much for coming. This is really, really good. I'm super excited.
Yay.
I might start studying again. You know.
All right. I hope you guys have a really good rest of your Empower group meeting.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Yep.
See you guys later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later.